Why did nobody warn me? I mean, thank you for not warning me and spoiling it, but how could nobody warn me about what was about to happen? I'm in shock, I'm impressed, I'm a little pissed, and I'm also overjoyed with just how incredible the actual ending to this arc was. Way to completely shift expectations and really take the readers for an insane ride. Still, I've been duped. I've been bamboozled. I've been swindled. I've been stabbed in the chest by someone I trusted. Okay. No exaggeration, this may be one of the coolest twists I've read in a manga. It's been a while since I've been fooled like this by a series, probably not since the identities of the colossal and armored titans were revealed has a manga slapped me in the face like this. Of all the people that I thought were up to no good, I definitely didn't think it was the guy that got murdered. This was a murder mystery that wasn't a murder mystery at all. Instead, it was the carefully laid plans of a seriously diabolical villain. I'm still just kinda letting it sink in. Captain Eisen is the bad guy, and he apparently always was. I regret ever saying Eisen reminded me of my dad a few videos ago. My dad would never. This whole thing just completely caught me off guard. I couldn't put these chapters down because I was so shocked and I just needed to keep going. One might even say that I was under hypnosis, completely lulled in and realizing that I was looking at the wrong things throughout this whole Soul Society arc. I should have been paying much more attention to the mystery of Aizen's supposed death, but like Ichigo, my focus was completely on trying to save Rukia. It was a brilliant bit of misdirection. You want to know the worst part, though? The worst part is I have seen this face on the internet before. I have seen this character in passing, and I had no idea that that man is this man. So the next time someone tells you that Clark Kent's disguise wouldn't work in the real world, I am proof that it actually might. I am proof that someone might fall for it. Sosuke Aizen is proof that it might work. Alright. So before we get into that craziness, let's rewind and break this whole thing down, because I need to talk about this. I seriously need to just go through and process this whole wild series of events, so strap in or bear with me, whichever. We've just got to let all of this wash over us and figure out what the hell happened. A few videos ago, I talked about the apparent murder of Captain Eisen and how it created this whodunit mystery subplot for the Soul Reapers. At the time, it just seemed like an interesting extra layer to the story. One of the friendlier Soul Reapers we were introduced to winds up dead, which I wrongly assumed was just a way of showing us that Ichigo and the others would have less potential allies during their infiltration. I assumed Captain Aizen's death was used to show that the Soul Society had more violent, seedy things happening than what we were really aware of at the time, which I guess is sort of true, but not in the way that I thought. Readers have no real reason to not take the murder at face value at the time. We knew that the Soul Society is dangerous, and we're being introduced to all these new characters who may have motives that we aren't aware of just yet. We only got to know Aizen just enough to know that it was unfortunate that he died, and that the death of a captain from inside of Soul Reapers HQ is not a normal thing. But the truth was, Captain Aizen seemed expendable, just a plain-looking dude among all kinds of visually interesting and colorful characters, so I didn't really question the death too much outside of trying to think of who killed him. The thought that he faked his death never, ever occurred to me. Then there was the matter of the note he'd written before his death, the one that seemed like it was going to be his last known thoughts and that launched so much suspicion and paranoia among some of the Soul Reapers. His letters seemed to be confirmation that there was some kind of conspiracy happening, but it throws you off when the guy revealing that information ends up being the one conspiring. But that letter was just for his lieutenant's benefit. So let's talk about poor Momo Hinamori. Looking back on my previous videos throughout this arc, I realized that I haven't talked about Momo at all, despite how much focus she's gotten in a certain part of the story. Her storyline has been so separate from Ichigo and the others' rescue mission, too busy trying to get justice for someone that she really cared about. Being Aizen's subordinate and someone that was deeply, deeply inspired by him, she takes it hardest when he's supposedly assassinated, and makes it her mission to figure out who could have killed a man that she admired so much. She's understandably grief-stricken, almost obsessed with getting answers for what happened, and will go to any lengths to avenge Aizen. When she receives the letter that Aizen wrote before he quote-unquote died, the letter points her directly at one of her oldest friends, Captain Hitsugaya. And she is so shattered, so lost in her grief, that she is willing to try to kill her friend. It's just so sad to see. She spent her time as a Soul Reaper trying to emulate Aizen, trying to be as good as she can be, and when he's gone, she's clearly lost a big part of who she is. It's very difficult to watch, but after learning what we do later, learning that it was all to make her intentionally codependent and easy to manipulate, it's even worse. Losing your loved one is a very hard thing, but having them betray you is even worse. In all of this, considering that Aizen wasn't actually murdered, Momo is the one that's actually the victim because her emotions and mind are completely manipulated and torn apart, used by someone that she trusted above anyone else. Kubo makes you feel for her and her efforts, and that's what makes what happens later so tough to read. It's just a very sad story that comes to an even sadder conclusion. One of Kubo's best decisions in pulling this twist off was to have a red herring. And for those who aren't familiar with that term, a red herring is a suspect that we're led to believe is the culprit and that most clues point to, but turns out not to be the culprit, and is instead just used narratively as a diversion to distract us from the actual truth. Gin Ichimaru was the red herring. He was the prime suspect from the moment we met him, and every scene with him after that just made it seem more and more likely that he was the one that killed Captain Aizen. From just a design standpoint, he's unsettling, he's shady, and he resembles a snake. So at best, he's slippery and maybe poisonous, and at worst, he is literally Satan. And many of the characters also suspected him, which made it even easier for us as readers to share those suspicions. He was always smiling, even during the worst of times, and always taking joy in the misery of others. If there was one person among the Soul Reapers who you look at and go, that's probably a bad guy, it's Gin Ichimaru. I can admit that I fully believe that he was just going to turn out to be the one that killed Aizen. Everything we'd seen about him just made it seem like it had to be him. He was manipulative and likes playing with people's minds, so it seemed possible that he's also toying with the readers' minds, and in a way, he was. He was so shady that him not being involved in any capacity would have almost seemed ridiculous, so Kubo did the smart thing with this red herring, by making him only partially a red herring. He's not the main culprit, he's not the one solely responsible for all of the trouble, but he is working with the true mastermind, betraying the Soul Reapers to join Aizen. By making Gin so blatantly antagonistic and creepy, Kubo managed to use him to hide Aizen's involvement, since it turned out the mild-mannered dead guy was the real villain, and far worse than the obvious snake in the garden. Kubo used Gin brilliantly, constantly making it seem like he was the most dangerous player on the board when he was working for someone like Aizen the whole time. Even if he didn't turn out to be the main bad guy, Gin played his role to perfection, and I wholeheartedly think that all of this wouldn't have been nearly as effective if Gin was the evil mastermind. No, he worked far better as an unsettling diversion, an important cog in Aizen's operation. While most of the Soul Reaper captains are busy trying to apprehend the intruders from the mortal world, there is one captain that mostly spends his time playing detective, or at least doing what he can to unravel what happened to Captain Aizen, and that's Captain Toshiro Hitsugaya. As I've talked about before, Tite Kubo is fantastic at giving characters distinctive looks that help them stand out, and Captain Hitsugaya is no exception. From his youthful appearance, along with that kind of short King, Hiei, Captain Levi kind of energy, to his stark white hair, to his ice powers, he's a really cool character and is shaping up to be one of my favorite Soul Reapers. Because he grew up with Momo and is real close with her, he ends up getting wrapped into the mystery to try and help and protect her, or at least to help her try to deal with what happened to her captain. After managing to survive Momo's attack after he's wrongfully accused of being the killer, he and his Lieutenant Rengiku travel to the real seat of power in Soul Society. Central 46 is essentially the Supreme Court of the Soul Society, made up of 40 sages and 6 judges that have absolute authority when giving verdicts for Soul Reaper crimes, and no one can appeal that once it's been made. They're the ones who have, ordered for Rukia to be executed, and everyone has to, make sure that happens. They're even higher in the chain than Head Captain Yamamoto, and they've been the ones behind the scenes dictating all the decisions when it comes to this execution. Throughout the arc, we've heard some orders from them come down to the captains, and they've shifted around the date or pushed things forward, and we've even seen how sometimes these decisions don't seem to be making sense to some of the Soul Reapers. When Hitsugaya finds the members of Central 46 slaughtered, it caught me by surprise because they haven't been physically part of the story, but that was clearly the point. They were just out of eyesight behind closed doors, and now they're all dead. Initially, Hitsugaya believes that our red herring Gin is responsible for the slaughter, but even he knows he couldn't have done it alone. The scariest part of the massacre of the Central 46 is Captain Hitsugaya realizing that the council wasn't just killed recently. They've been dead for a while, possibly before all of these orders that they've supposedly been giving, meaning that those orders were coming from someone else. Someone posing to be the dead council members. The fact that no one knew and that the ones in charge have been replaced is terrifying because the Soul Reapers follow those orders without question, and as we learn later, Hitsugaya's theory is proven to be correct. There have been others making the decisions for some time. Longer than I expected, honestly. Kubo does a nice flourish here where he uses Gin's lieutenant Izuru to make it seem like it really is just Gin as the culprit, only to then pull out the real villain. In hindsight, I should have realized that characters like Momo and Hitsugaya not getting directly involved in Ichigo's story should have meant something more than just a subplot, but it still had a way of sneaking up on me when suddenly the gravity of all their investigations comes down so hard when Aizen steps out of the shadows and shows Momo that he's been alive this whole time. A scene in Bleach hasn't made my skin crawl quite as much as the moment when Aizen shows Momo that he's alive. I couldn't believe that he was standing there because I had fully written him off as the story's sacrificial lamb that needed to die to show that something was wrong with at least some parts of the Soul Society. But nope, there he is, and I'm sitting there looking like an absolute dumbass. My surprise was nothing compared to poor Momo. She was in tears, so happy to see the man that she admires so much. And it's this moment of just probably pure bliss for her, and he's acting all comforting and giving her a hug, then runs her through with his sword without any hesitation, just stabs her right through her poor little heart. That poor woman. I can't imagine what that must have felt like for her, looking up at him and realizing that the person you respected and loved so much, idolized even, could hurt you like that. And the worst part? She has no idea why this is happening. Just a seriously bone-chilling reveal. I almost audibly screamed when he stabbed her, and that rarely happens to me while reading anything. The casual cruelty of it all is just really, really effective. I immediately hated this man, and he's just so nonchalant about his betrayal, even when confronted by other captains like Hitsugaya and Unohana. Hitsugaya loses it when he sees that Momo was struck down by Aizen, knowing full well how much that woman admired him, and despite showing off his very cool Bankai in a moment of vengeance, Aizen defeats him with ease. And while Hitsugaya might have the ice powers, Aizen's got some real cold lines throughout all of these chapters, like, oh my god, this is top tier villain stuff. It's a guy that is comfortable with what he's doing and how he looks, he's enjoying himself, and it's scary to see how calm and at ease he is throughout all of his treachery. He seems especially happy when he's explaining how he pulled off his plan, reveling in the shock and confusion and proving himself to be superior to his former colleagues. Hypnosis is such a fitting power for him to have, and his Zanpakuto being able to create perfect all-sensory illusions is absolutely terrifying. When he tells them that the Central 46 has been dead since the Substitute arc, and that he's just been using his powers to make it look like all these people were still alive and in session, that's incredible and also horrifying. All he has to do is show people his Zanpakuto's release just once, and from that point on, they're susceptible to his hypnosis. The idea that he gathered a bunch of his colleagues together and told them a lie about what his sword could do, like showing it off to them, all so that they would be under his spell from that point on, is just a genius move. That is a genius move. And I love the explanation that anyone who sees it can be hypnotized. But Tozin, a blind man, would never be able to fall under its power. But as it turns out, Tozin is also in league with Aizen too. Aizen was smart enough to recruit the one person that wouldn't fall for his hypnosis, completely removing him as an enemy. That was a fun way to reveal that, as Tozin sends Rukia right back to the execution grounds she'd escaped. Except now there's an even worse threat than the captains that attended the execution. Tozin being a traitor was effective for almost the exact opposite reasons that Gin being a villain was effective. During his fight with Kenpachi, we learned about his views on peace and justice, but he learned the hard way that just wanting those things might not be enough to bring it about. He believes that he needs to attain more power in order to enforce justice and bring about peace. At the time, it seemed like he was just talking about that being the reason that he became a Soul Reaper. But now it's obvious that those thoughts didn't stop at becoming a Soul Reaper. He wants power beyond that. He apparently thinks Aizen will help bring about a real peace and a real just society. The friendship between Tozin and Komamura is also really sweet, as we learn a little about that. A man who's ashamed of his appearance befriending someone that can't see them is something of a classic trope, but most of those other situations didn't end up with the blind person betraying them. We didn't get to spend much time seeing Aizen as a captain among the Soul Reapers, except for a few flashbacks here and there, but it's clear from just all of their reactions when they learned about him that this is an extremely unexpected betrayal. He was well liked and respected in their ranks, and most of all, he was trusted. But according to him, the Aizen that they knew was just another one of his illusions, and had never really existed at all. He had always been conspiring, plotting, and scheming to get Rukia into a position where she would be killed and her soul would be destroyed, all because there was something inside of her that he wanted. It was genius to have us be able to take a break and think that Rukia is finally out of harm's way, only to have her brought right back to where she'd escaped from, back to the same grounds where she was almost executed. It makes it feel like all of our efforts were for nothing, and somehow the threat to her well-being seems even more intense, despite there not being a big ceremony or a flaming bird and people like Yamamoto and Byakuya there. Aizen felt more intimidating than all of those factors combined. One of the things I loved most was how easily he handled so many of the characters that we have seen fight throughout the arc. We've seen how tough some of these people are, and Aizen dispatches them with such little effort. Even Ichigo, with how far he's come with his sword, gets blocked by nothing more than one single finger. He unlocked his Bankai, he defeated Byakuya, but we see that he's nothing but an insect to Aizen. Every effort Ichigo has taken has been anticipated and expected by Aizen, who used everything we've seen this whole arc as just a distraction for his own plans. A lot of these chapters are full of him just explaining things, and as it turns out, he's responsible for a lot of things that we have seen. Hell, he's even responsible for creating that crazy hollow, all in his attempts to destroy the barriers between Soul Reapers and Hollows. It's all because of his interest in what he calls hollowification. This is really fascinating stuff. There are limits to how powerful a Soul Reaper can become, and the only way they can grow beyond those limits is to gain hollow powers, and the same goes for Hollows needing to become Soul Reapers to get stronger. It's a wild concept, but I assume that this at least hints at whatever's going on with Ichigo and his Hollow Mask. Is that how he's gotten so much stronger so quickly? Is it because he's already started to hollowify? Considering it was Urahara that studied hollowification, and also Urahara that nearly let Ichigo turn into a hollow, has Ichigo just been an experiment this whole time? Whatever the case, Aizen wants to sever the borders between Soul Reapers and Hollows, and needs a device called a Hogyaku, and Urahara hid it inside of Rukia this whole time. The moment that Aizen found that out, everything that we've seen from Rukia's arrest, specifically being arrested by her brother and childhood friend, has all been part of Aizen's plan to get the Hogyaku from within her, and there are only a few ways to do that. The easiest would have been to have her be executed, because that would have destroyed her soul and released the Hogyaku. Her execution wasn't really about her crime of giving a mortal her power, no. The Central 46 wasn't even alive to pass that judgment. Aizen controlled that too. It was all about getting the Hogyaku. But Aizen also had to account for Rukia's friends from the mortal world, and even just knowing that there was a small chance that they might rescue her, he made a contingency. This guy is smart. Scary smart, and seems to have every single possible angle covered and planned for. As his backup plan, he uses a device that Uruhara developed to remove the Hogyoku from Rukia, finally getting the power to remove the barrier between Soul Reapers and Hollows. Even when, almost every character we've met comes to try to stop him, he naturally has an escape plan. Beams of light come down from the sky, and my favorite group in Bleach comes to be Aizen's interdimensional getaway car. You know how I've been pegging this whole arc for the Hollows to come back in some capacity because I love them so much? Well, it's like they heard me, because they just rip open the sky and they reach out like they want me to take their huge hands, and I'm just like, yes, I fucking missed you guys, and they're like, we fucking missed you too, and I don't know what we've got going on with them and Aizen, but it's probably not good. While a lot of Hollows are very much just nom nom eat souls, we do know that there are some more that are cunning, conniving, and intelligent than that. So maybe this is some kind of alliance or something, or Aizen is in control of them, or they are just using him. I don't know, but it's crazy, and I love it, and I can't wait to see more fun Hollow designs from Kubo. It's all just so exciting. Aizen and his treacherous allies bid their farewells to their former colleagues and rise up to be whisked away by the Hollows, and Aizen has his big moment to really proclaim himself as the new villain of the series. He's talking about taking heaven's throne and being above the gods, literally ascending as he's talking about rising to a new state of being. I assume that this ascension of his has to do with him using the Hogyoku to give himself some crazy hollow powers, but we'll see. It's clear that his motivation is to become some sort of god. I did like that even as he's leaving, he acknowledges that our hero was at least a little surprising and impressive, even though he previously said that Ichigo had played his part and wasn't needed anymore. It's a nice moment to connect the hero and the villain, even just for a second. In the end, the glasses are off, and the hair is slicked back, and suddenly there's a new man standing there, a new big bad to have to defeat. Whew. This was phenomenal. I thought that the Ichigo Byakuya fight was the climax to the Soul Society arc, but no. This was the climax, and what an incredible, incredible ending it was. We learn the truth behind Rukia's execution, the answer to the case of the dead captain, the outcome to all of this conspiracies and fights, and what it all has really been about and really been leading to. And in just the span of a handful of chapters, Sosuke Aizen went from a dead guy I felt a little sorry for to someone that is easily the best antagonist in the series so far, and he's only just started to show what he's capable of. Tite Kubo pulled the rug out from under me, and that's probably exactly what he wanted. It was an amazing plot twist and an amazing reveal, and it has me more excited than ever to see what happens next. From how it looks, we don't stand a chance. But let's be real, the actual craziest reveal during these chapters was the moment when we got to catch a glimpse of Mayuri without his makeup. To hell with Aizen. This was the biggest twist. Thank you so much for watching and following the journey through Bleach and through the Soul Society arc. I've been loving the ride, and I can't wait to see where we go from here, especially after this. Bleach has had some good villains for Ichigo, but now it finally seems to have a real big bad to hate, and that's going to be so much fun. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon as we move on to the next arc of Tite Kubo's Bleach.